Welcome back to another episode of the Girls Talk Money podcast. A few months ago, we brought on a dietitian to the podcast to talk about simple strategies for eating healthy without breaking your grocery budget. That was such a popular episode, but food is still such a big topic in relation to sticking to your grocery budget or your food and drink budget, prioritizing your health, eating healthy but balanced, and so much more. So today, that is what we're talking about in today's episode. We're going to share our favorite tips and what has helped us start to eat healthier to feel our best while also prioritizing time and budget. I know I personally have gone through such a journey with food and health. I've talked about this a few times on my socials, but I did go through a period of, let's just say, a pretty low point in college. It took me a really long time to learn how to exercise and fuel my body in a way that actually makes me feel good. And I've come such a long way, and now it is one of the most important points of my life. So I'm super excited to have this conversation today.
Yes, I feel like first I just want to say we talked about this a little bit before we started filming, but we're going to be talking obviously about health, wellness, body image, things like that. And so if that's a topic that you might find like triggering or that might be uncomfortable for you, you can absolutely skip ahead, and we'll make a note in the show notes of where you can skip ahead to if you would like to avoid that part of the conversation. And that's totally fine if you're not at a point in your journey where this conversation is something that's going to make you feel safe and comfortable. That's totally fine. But I think like we've had conversations about this kind of, especially after filming that episode with Gabrielle. And I know that that episode really did make me think a lot harder about how I was taking care of my body, which is funny because we were just like filming it for the podcast. But it really did like help me a lot to have that conversation. And we've had conversations in private about this as well. So I'm also really excited for this conversation. I think it'll be a good way to get to know us a little bit more, just sharing more about our stories, but then also about, just like general what we do for health.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, so Grace and I are both 25. And this has been a thing for me and like a big thing for me since going to college. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, but like the freshman 15 is a thing, and it's something that I like was not prepared for literally in the slightest. I have opened up about this on my socials a couple of times, but it's not something that I talk about super frequently. I gained the freshman 15 in college in the first semester. In 3 months, I put on over 15 pounds in college. And growing up, I was an athlete. I played 3 sports. I was always very like an athletic build, but also like a very lean build. But I never knew how to exercise outside of playing a sport. I never exercised like even one time outside of playing a sport. So when I got to college, I wasn't exercising anymore because I was no longer playing a sport. And on top of that, I never learned how to eat healthy growing up. It just like really wasn't something that was super prioritized in my household. My mom would cook us dinner every night, and it's not that she would make like the most unhealthy things, but she also wouldn't make like the most healthy things. And then we were definitely the household where you open up the cabinets and it's like sugary cereals and Pop Tarts. And if I was on my own for the night, I would literally eat like frozen waffles for dinner and things like that. It just like wasn't something that I was ever taught how to eat healthy or how to cook vegetables in a way that I actually like them or anything like that. So gained the freshman 15 in only 3 months being in college, and it really took me down a path of like pretty disordered eating habits for about a year. Like I was honestly at a really low point, and it took me about a year to get out of that low point. The only thing that got me out of it was, luckily I have an older brother, and he let me start working out with him around sophomore year of college, and he taught me how to lift weights, and then he ate pretty healthy, so I like kind of learned from him in a way. And that sort of got me out of it and started me on a journey of learning how to eat healthy, learning how to exercise on my own, learning how to exercise in a way that made me feel good. I will say though, throughout the rest of college and then going into my like post grad life, I was really at a point where even though I was back to a point where I was pretty happy with the way that I looked physically, I felt terribly because I was on the complete opposite end of, I got into a pattern of like very restrictive eating habits. I tried to eat like the lowest calorie foods possible. I was afraid of a lot of foods. And that really got me to a point of like, okay, how, even though I'm like not unhappy with the way that I look, I am unhappy with the way that I feel. And how do I get to a point where I can learn how to feel my best, eat foods that actually fuel my body to make me feel my best.
I feel like we have a lot of like similarities in the story, especially when you were saying like how you grew up and how health was prioritized. It wasn't really a big conversation in my household either. And same with like my mom would make dinner every night, and we had chicken and mashed potatoes and green beans, whatever. Like we were having a well-rounded plate, but like we also like we were known in like our friend groups for having the snack shelf is what we called it. And and there's nothing wrong with having snacks or whatever, especially when there's kids and kids are picky eaters and kids are more sensitive to different food textures and things like that. Like it's okay to have, different things in the house, but it was a lot of processed snacks and snacks that are really heavy in sugar and just like not things that are providing our body with like the nutrients that it needed. And we were getting them, like I said, from, the lunches and dinners that my parents would make us, but it was just not something that was talked about. And so we were kind of similar in that area. But when I went to college, I kind of had an opposite like situation. Opposite but similar. We kind of ended up in the same place. But I was struggling really, really badly with my mental health my junior year of high school, and it kind of peaked or hit a low, however you want to view it. My first semester of college, my mental health's never been worse than it was that semester. I was just like in and out of emergency counseling, and like, it was very, very rough. And people who struggled with mental health or anxiety know that sometimes when you are super anxious, you just lose your appetite. And so I like wasn't really eating. There were days where I would literally have a handful of Cheez-Its, and that was my meal, like my food for the entire day. And because I didn't want to go to the dining hall by myself, I was just like so anxious. I just didn't have an appetite. And so I lost 15 pounds in my first semester at college. But obviously incredibly unhealthily. I wasn't really even in a place where I didn't need to like lose any weight. Like it was just it was bad. And so as like a coping mechanism for my anxiety, it was recommended to me to start exercising. And so I went to the gym. And then I started, you know, noticing changes in my body, and then became obsessed with the gym, and then was in a relationship where if I missed a day at the gym, he would say things like, "You're going to lose your booty gains. Like, don't miss a day at the gym. Like, you got to be in there. Like, you got to stay in the gym." Or, like, he'd mention how he preferred thicker women. And, I had basically just unfortunately like starved myself for a semester and was trying to gain my appetite back and also trying to develop a healthy relationship with the gym. And here I have like someone who basically is making a lot of comments about my body and what I'm doing with it and food and exercise and all of it. And so basically it was like a double whammy, and I developed a really unhealthy relationship with both food and exercise. And I've spent the last like 4 years kind of unraveling that. um I think it took a while to be like, I would say probably only around January of this year did I get to a point where I was like, okay, like I can eat healthy in a way that makes my body feel good and not be like super obsessed with everything that I'm eating. Like it was always an all or nothing thing for me. I would try, God, I remember when I tried like the keto diet, it was horrible. But I'm like, and then I was like, why the heck am I doing this to myself, And I'm finally at a point where I can eat in a way that's balanced and that makes me feel good. I'm not restricting food. I'm not afraid of any foods. I'm not like, in that mindset. And also with exercising, I exercise because it makes me feel good. Has my body changed? And, am I now living in a smaller body when we're filming this in June than I was in January? Yes, I am. But that was never like the goal of the health journey. But it's hard because we're both coming from very similar angles where it's like you kind of have to redefine your relationship with food. And I think we're finally both at points where we can, view food in like a really balanced way and not have that kind of like, yeah, all or nothing like mindset.
100%. I definitely went through a phase of the obsessive points as well. And that was the remainder of my college experience for me. I was at a point too where I was like, if I missed the gym or if I didn't, I would go into the gym and I would run like 6 miles because I wanted to like sweat as much as possible and burn all of the calories. And I had an Apple Watch and I would check how many
Mm-hmm.
calories I burned at the gym. And then I was eating super low calorie foods. I was tracking my calories or trying to track my calories because I wanted to eat like low calorie so that I could lose the weight and all of the things. I remember at that point, I was stepping on the scale every single day for like a couple of years, probably 3 years straight. I would step on the scale every single day. And if I was up like 0.2 pounds, I would like beat myself up about it. Like that went on for
Mm-hmm.
3 whole years. And it's such a, like you look back at that point in your life and you're like, I was not enjoying my life at all because everything revolved around what I looked like or if I was bloated that day or like everything was, you were just obsessed with it. It's all you could think about. And I feel like I've talked about this on my socials before. And like I said, I graduated from college and I really wanted to get out of that. I wanted to stop feeling hungry all the time because I was so restrictive and was eating everything as low calorie as possible. Like I was afraid of things like peanut butter and avocados and potatoes because they were higher I was afraid to eat a banana. I remember after graduating from college, I saw a trainer at the first gym that I joined out of college and I was going to the gym first thing in the morning and he was like, are you eating anything before you go to the gym? And in my head, I'm like, no, because I like only eat 3 meals a day. Like I wouldn't eat before I would go to the gym. And he was like, just have a banana. And I was afraid of eating bananas because I thought they were like too high calorie, which is so sad. But I've talked about this on my socials. And what kind of got me out of that was I actually went through a phase for about a year of tracking my macros, which, if you don't know what macros are different than calories. Your macros are proteins, carbs, and fats. So let's say you have like a 100 calorie food. Within those 100 calories, a percentage is going to be protein calories, a percentage is going to be carbohydrate calories, and a percentage is going to be fat calories. And why I decided to do this was because, again, I wanted within the food that I was eating, I just wanted to feel better. I wanted to feel full and satiated, and I wanted to have energy throughout the day. I didn't want to feel the way that I was feeling for 3 whole years. So I wanted to learn what types of foods and like what macronutrients I needed to make myself feel good. And honestly, like I definitely don't think that it's necessary for everyone to do. Totally not. However, back to our upbringings in a situation where we're raised in households where we weren't really taught what nutrients we needed to fuel our body. That was the first time in my life that I really learned, like, okay, I do need to be eating enough protein. I need to be getting enough fiber. Like, this is why healthy fats are important. I really learned, like, what all of the refined sugar and all of the added sugar is doing because you're getting a ton of calories in, but you feel terrible and you feel hungry again an hour later. Like, that was really the first time in my life that I learned all of those things. And it's not something that I still do. I don't still like track all of the macros that I'm eating or anything like that. I do try to get enough protein and fiber in my diet. Like still to this day, I don't track it per se, but I am consciously aware of like, okay, did I get X amount of grams of protein today? Like, am I in that ballpark range? Because those are my two like big focus areas is protein and fiber.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying about like the obsessive nature, I remember I think I talked about this like once on my social media, but I really don't talk about it often. Just because I know it can be like triggering to people and I don't want to trigger anyone who doesn't want to be triggered. But I remember it was about 2 years ago. I would go to the gym every single day, and every single day before I would leave, I would like go in the bathroom to wash my hands because I just touched all the gym equipment and I would feel really gross. So I would go and I would take a picture of myself in the mirror every single day. I was like, no, this is fine because I'm not stepping on a scale. Like, it's okay. I would take a sideways photo of myself, like to see, like, does my stomach look flatter and does my butt look bigger every single day. And I look back, like, I have photos, like, I've deleted them from my phone, because my phone's full. Like, I just like back them up elsewhere and take the pictures out. But like, I can look back and literally see like these photos I would take of myself every day, just like hoping that, again, that my stomach looked flatter and my butt looked bigger. And it was the most unhealthy thing. And yeah, I think it was like 2 years ago in 2022, I was like, I'm going to stop going to the gym like altogether because I'm like, I clearly can't be here in a way that is healthy. Like, no matter whose workout plan I was following, or what I would tell myself in the morning before I'd go to the gym, or how much I would tell myself it didn't matter what I look like. Like it was such a place where the gym was just so toxic. It just was like, why am I going? You know what I mean? Like I'm just becoming so focused on what my body looks like. It's just becoming so toxic. And I think that became somewhat of a turning point for me. And I was like, okay, I feel like shit. I am not happy with how I look. I'm not confident in myself. I am like struggling with like what I'm eating because I was still like, I don't I always hesitate when I say anything around like disordered eating. And that's why I usually just say disordered eating patterns rather than saying like I had an eating disorder, because I never saw a doctor about it or even told my doctors about it, because I was embarrassed. But like I would kind of get into these like, I don't want to call them a binge pattern because I don't think it was as severe as like a real like binge eating disorder, but like I would restrict like all day, and then at night I'd be starving. Like I was so freaking hungry because I ate like nothing during the day, or I would like skip breakfast or like eat just a banana for breakfast and then go work all day. And like a banana is not enough to like fuel you for a whole day. Like it just doesn't make any sense. And it was toxic. And I think last year I started to kind of realize like I have to do something at some point about this. Like this is not how I want to live my life, and it's going to hurt and it's going to suck to like unravel all of this and to like find balance again. It feels bad to be like, oh, I have to step away from the gym. It felt embarrassing to be like, I have such an unhealthy relationship with food. Like it's something about it felt so embarrassing to admit to myself. But then when I started seeing a functional medicine doctor last year, it was like right around this time last year, probably like last June or July, was when her and I really started having conversations about like she's like, what are you eating? And I was like, I would describe like, I would say like I wasn't the most truthful with describing what I would eat the first time I like explained it to her, but then I like started explaining more. And then I'm like, if I'm not comfortable explaining to somebody like what I eat in a day, there might be something wrong with that. You know what I mean? I'm telling a doctor, a very, you know, non-judgmental doctor of like, here's what I eat. But I started realizing I'm not eating enough protein, and I'm hungry a couple hours after every meal. I wasn't even eating enough. Like my portions are so tiny. And then I was fluctuating to then eating portions that were way too big and would make me feel like I was eating to a point where I was like stuffed every time. And it was just like a back and forth. And I think last year around this time was definitely where things kind of started to turn around for me. And I really do think that the podcast episode with Gabrielle earlier this year was really helpful for me. And I started focusing more on things like fiber. And I definitely focus on protein and also just on like nutrients. Like I'm like, I want to live to be so old. Like I want to live to be like 100. That's always been like a thing that I just like, I want to live a long time. And I'm like, I cannot expect my body, the one body that I get, I cannot expect it to sustain me for years and years and years and years if I'm not nourishing it and supporting it at all. And it's funny because in so many other areas of our lives, I feel like we're so good about that maintenance. Like I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to get my haircuts. I'm going to use high quality shampoo. I'm going to put my hair oil in every single day so that my hair looks good, or with your skincare routine or whatever. And you would never expect your hair or skin to look good without taking care of them, you know? But then it's like when it comes to your body and what you're eating, I think, at least for me, I was expecting so much output from my body. I was like, why do I not feel focused? Why do I not feel energized? Why am I sleeping poorly? Why does my skin look bad? All these things. It's like, well, because you're literally not nourishing your body at all. And I will say, since like really focusing on it this year, I feel so much better. Like I just, I, yeah, my health has taken such a 180 from, I mean, in last year too, I found out that I have a gluten allergy and that was causing a lot of health issues I was struggling with for the 10 years prior. So that obviously helped. And my body's at a point where it's like healed from that now. But I think, I don't know, I just think focusing on like nourishing too, like I look at meals and I'm like, what can I add? Not what can I take away? Like, oh, I'm going to take this out because it's quote unquote unhealthy. I'm like, what can I add to this meal? Like, I'm still going to eat, you know, chocolate or ice cream or like things that are considered traditionally like unhealthy, quote unquote. I don't believe in healthy versus unhealthy food. I don't like that terminology at all. But I think I look at it more from like a what can I add, not I have to take this away to be a certain way or to look a certain way.
Yeah, definitely focusing on like making the things more nutrient dense to feel better. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that was the big turning point for me was like noticing once you start to do it and you start to gain some momentum, you start to notice how good you feel. And like when you lay down at night, do you feel good or do you feel like full and like kind of gross because you did restrict yourself all day and then binged right before bed? I know like you kind of mentioned the whole like disordered eating patterns and stuff, and this is not something that I have like ever opened up about publicly on socials because again, same thing, it's just like sort of a trigger warning for a lot of people, and we're going to put the timestamps in the show notes. So if you like want to skip ahead to this point, but like I was like full on bulimic for an entire year. Like when I say that I like had disordered eating, like I had a full on eating disorder. And I remember like kind of a big turning point for me was that I joined a co-ed basketball team in college about 6 months into this whole thing, and I did it like right before the basketball game, and I like almost passed out because I was like trying to play basketball like on an empty stomach after doing that. And yeah, that was sort of like a big turning point for me, and like okay, I really need to get my shit together, Erin. Like what is going on with me? And I never felt good. I never felt good. I literally for an entire year and a half, I just like did not feel good. And even after I stopped doing that, I was still in a pattern of just like straight up not feeling good because it was so restrictive and was trying to eat as little calories as possible. And yeah, just getting to a turning point where I'm like, I want to feel good. I want to feel confident. I want to have energy to live my life. I want to have energy to go to work all day and then go to the gym after because I'm 22 years old and there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to work and work out and just like have energy to live my life. We should maybe like pivot a little bit into kind of like some tips and some things that we do in both like the grocery shopping category and also the cooking category, because that's like the main point of like what we want to talk about in this episode is kind of like how we grocery shop, things that we buy, and then on the cooking side like recipes that we love and all of those good things to kind of like give you tips to walk away from this episode feeling prepared to like if this is if there's steps that you want to take like in the right direction to start eating more nutrient dense, start eating healthier, live a balanced life, like all of those things, you can take away some actionable tips. So let's go to the grocery category first. We asked some questions on our Instagram story of like different things you guys wanted to hear about in this episode. And we got a lot of questions around things like what our weekly grocery budgets look like, how to shop organic or how to shop for quote unquote like healthier items without totally breaking your budget, money efficient ways to save time, have convenience, all of those things. So let's start there.
Yes. So also I just want to preface or just like add in, this is not like a weight loss
No.
episode at all, nor is that like we are focused on like eating foods that make us feel good, and that like support our bodies and brains. And yeah. So I just want to like preface that. I don't want anyone to feel like we're talking about losing weight here. Because I know that can definitely be like triggering. And I really, as a side note, I hate when I see the content online that's like, here's what I eat in a day. And the video starts with like a girl like body checking and like showing her abs. And I'm like, okay, first of all, like, no. Like, I'm just like, it's no, I just think it's so unhealthy and toxic. So that's not the vibe we're going for here. It's all about balance. And yeah, just want to preface that. So okay, grocery shopping. So I live by myself. I'm shopping for one person. And I eat gluten and dairy free because I'm allergic to gluten and dairy. So my monthly budget for groceries is $250. I don't have like a weekly grocery budget where I'm like, oh, I can only spend this much per week, because certain things I buy, like if I buy a bag of gluten-free flour, it's going to last me multiple weeks. I just was on vacation for 2 weeks and did like a big restock when I came back because I used up like pretty much everything in my pantry before I left. So I bought like my chia seeds, my hemp hearts, the gluten-free flour, like just a bunch of stuff that like is going to last me more than 1 week. So I don't have a strict weekly budget, but I do try to keep my monthly budget under 250. I live in New England, and so we have Market Basket up here. I think Market Basket is in some places outside New England, but I know it's more in the northeast region of the US. It's kind of like an Aldi in a way, although they have like name brand stuff. It's just a lot cheaper than places, than some of the other like grocery chains, like a Stop and Shop or Big Y or like things like that. And so I try to do most of my shopping there just because everything is a little bit cheaper. I will say though, when it comes to my budget of being like 250 a month, I am a little bit flexible with it if there are things I want to buy that are outside of that budget. Now, I'm not flexible on it when it comes to me just being lazy. Like if I'm like, ugh, like I don't feel like eating what I have, I'm gonna go like buy other stuff. I'm like, no, why don't we try to like use up some of what we have before we go buy more? Or like, if I'm being unrealistic of like I really want to like buy a bunch of different things this week, but I know I'm not going to be able to eat all of it that week. I'm just like, no, let's not do that. Let's not go over budget. However, being gluten and dairy free, it is harder to find swaps. Like the gluten-free bread that I buy is literally like $7 a loaf or $8 a loaf. It's like actually it's so it's I mean it's an investment if you want to have gluten-free bread and you want to have the good kind, it's going to cost you. But also with certain things like, again, buying chia seeds, hemp hearts, gluten-free flour, like it's all, I think the hemp hearts are like $8 a bag. I think the chia seeds are like $8 a bag. Like it is stuff that is higher priced in comparison to other stuff. So I will allow myself to spend money on those things because it is important to me to nourish my body and to do it in ways that feel exciting to me. Like I want to buy foods I'm excited to eat. And sometimes that means spending more money. So that's my grocery budget, but I'm not incredibly strict with it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I have my line item for groceries in my budget template is $300 a month. And I do try to stay under that, but I'm sort of the same way. If I'm like getting close to the end of the month and I'm like really close to that, but there is a recipe that I want to make that requires like almond flour. I'm not gluten free, but I do try to buy ingredients that are a little bit like more nutrient dense and things like that. So I don't have flour in my household, but I have almond flour because I bake with it a lot and things like that, but it's over $10 for a container.
Yeah.
Just I'm a little bit flexible with it as well. I know we got one question when we pulled our audience that was like, I'm consistently spending over $100 every single week at the grocery store, and what are some tips to pull back? I definitely see where this is coming from because I feel like I was getting to a point like around last year where I started to consistently spend over $100 at the grocery store. And if you're not mindful about it, I do think that is like relatively easy to do. And I think for me, when I was spending this much money on groceries, it was because I wasn't making a list before I went to the store, but not even just making a grocery list. I wasn't being intentional about what meals I was making out of the list that I was making, which sounds really intuitive, but I would just like make a list and add all of the things that I could potentially need for the week. And I wasn't being intentional with like, okay, these are the breakfasts that I'm going to eat. These are the lunches that I'm going to make. These are the dinners that I'm going to make. So now I always, like when I'm making my grocery list in my phone, I always start with like, okay, what are the meals that I'm making? And then out of that, what are the ingredients that I already have? I'm checking my pantry, I'm checking my freezer. And then what ingredients do I still need in order to kind of make my list. Other than that, I think like, yeah, definitely shopping at Aldi as opposed to Giant Eagle is the grocery store that I have that's like a little bit more of an expensive grocery store. However, I will say that I'm not an exclusive Aldi shopper because there are certain things that I want to buy that Aldi doesn't carry, and I will splurge on certain things. Like Aldi is not going to carry the almond flour that I want, or I like to bake, but I always buy dark chocolate chips that don't have any sugar added. Like Aldi doesn't carry that. Just little, or the Greek yogurt that I really like that doesn't have any sugar added. Aldi doesn't carry. So I will go to the more expensive grocery stores to buy certain things, but I try not to get into the habit of, for convenience, always going to the more expensive grocery store just because I don't feel like driving across town to go to Aldi, because it does save me like a ton of money. I know we got another question too about how to shop organic if you're trying to like stick within your grocery budget, because obviously organic food is really expensive. I personally don't shop organic, and I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a nutritionist, but we did talk about the whole organic topic in our conversation with Gabrielle. So you can go back to that episode. We'll put it in the show notes if you want to find it. To kind of talk like, should you be buying organic? We're not here to tell you whether you should or shouldn't, but if you are at a point where you want to buy some things organic, I feel like it's a good practice to kind of think through, okay, which items do I really want to be buying organic, and go to a Whole Foods to get those, but then don't buy all of your groceries consistently every single week there. Like maybe you're going to Whole Foods to buy a couple of organic items, but then you're going to finish the rest of your grocery shopping at Aldi or something like that if you're trying to cut back a little bit in your grocery budget.
Yeah. So two things. One, going back to like the how are we like keeping the budget down? I think so. I'm one of the people who like I can eat the same thing every day for lunch and dinner, and I will like fixate on a certain food for the longest time, and then I won't eat it for a year. Like that's just so I've been on like a yogurt bowl kick, and I just do yogurt bowls like every morning. I love avocado toast with egg. I'll do that some days. But I've literally eaten yogurt bowls almost every single day for breakfast for the last probably month and a half, 2 months. But then again, I probably will get sick of it at some point, and then I'll be on like a different kick and I'll eat something else for breakfast, like overnight oats every day for a couple months. I know that's like some people's worst nightmare. But for me, like I really enjoy that. And so having certain things on hand, pantry staples, whatever, it kind of becomes easy. But also like on a week to week basis, I pretty much always have salads for lunch. I just did a video about this where I like broke it down a little bit more too, but I always do salads for lunch. I just like salads. One of the things I started focusing on this year was like, how can I eat foods that make me feel better? And one thing that I started doing was just not eating foods that don't make me feel good. So again, I'm allergic to gluten and dairy, and then I also don't have a gallbladder. I had my gallbladder removed several years ago because I had a really big gallstone, and so I can't digest high fat foods. Like it just hurts my stomach. But sometimes I find that other foods, my body just has a hard time breaking down. Like I love the taste of like honeydew, but I can't like I can only have like one slice of honey because in my stomach it just hurts. Or like when it comes to things like rice or like white potatoes, for some reason my stomach, like I can do a very small amount of it, but it hurts my stomach after. It's not unhealthy. Like they're not foods that are not nutrient dense. There's great benefits to eating rice, eating whole grains, whatever, but my body just can't do it. And so I started focusing on like what makes me actually feel good after I finish that meal. And salads are one of those things that I can eat that do feel good. And I make them fun. I feel like a lot of people don't like salads because they're just eating like a bowl. They're just raw dogging lettuce basically. And I'm like, you can't
Yeah.
expect your salad to be good if you're just raw dogging lettuce. You got to put some good stuff on it. So I do that usually for lunches. And then for dinners, I try to have two different dinner options depending. So like this week I did pork chops and the package came with 4 pork chops. So I only got that, which actually those pork chops were literally $3. So I feel like that's a hack. Like that's way cheaper than the chicken I bought. So that will be my dinners for the week because there's 4 there. I usually go out to dinner one night a week with a friend or something. But other weeks I will do like 2 different dinners. And I think planning, here's what I'm going to eat for the week is helpful. As another like note, like in the same vein, I try to do more like ingredient prep rather than meal prep, so that I'm not eating exactly the same thing every day. So this week I did pork chops, then I cooked sweet potatoes, and then I roasted cauliflower, zucchini, and broccoli. And they're all in separate containers so that if one day I want to have zucchini as my side, I can. If I want to have cauliflower the next day as my veggie, I can. If I want to swap out sweet potato and have a side salad or rice or quinoa, I can. I'm not like married to like this little container that is a meal. And I switch up my salads if I want to. Sometimes I'll have 2 salad dressings on hand so I can swap them around. Like you don't have to eat like meal prep. You can ingredient prep. And then there was something else you were talking about. Oh, the organic thing. I don't really buy a lot of organic. Some stuff that I buy because it is like allergen friendly. Some of that stuff ends up being just organic, like because that's the only allergen friendly option, and that's really the only time I will buy organic things. Or if I really want a fruit or vegetable, and the normal ones look like trash at the grocery store that week. Sometimes like I'm just like the
Yeah.
onions look crazy, so I'm like, fine, I'll buy organic. But I really don't like buy organic stuff otherwise. It's not important to me. I don't think that it makes like a massive difference. From my understanding, organic just means that it wasn't like treated with the same like pesticides that other stuff was, or it's just using more like whole ingredients. So some things I just really don't feel like it makes a difference. Certain things I'll look at the ingredient list. Like I buy these tortilla chips, um, and I'll look at the ingredient list, and the organic one has like way fewer ingredients, and the ingredients are just like corn and like, so it's a little bit less processed. So I'll go with that, but I really don't I'm not like, oh, I want to like buy organic. I think you just have to
Yeah.
figure out like, why are you buying organic? What's the reason behind it? And if you really value that and it's worth the money for you, then maybe pull money from another spot in your budget and make that like sacrifice, or
Yeah.
don't eat organic.
Yeah, and like I said, we talked about all of the organic stuff and like the
Hmm.
pesticide conversation in the episode with the dietitian. So we can link that in the show notes so that you guys can find that episode. But I do something sort of similar with like the ingredient prep situation. Like one of the recipes, we got a ton of questions on like some recipes that we love. So we're kind of like sprinkling them in here and there. But I've been on a big kick of doing like sheet pan chicken sausage and vegetables. So I'll just like cut up a bunch of chicken sausage. I will cut up a bunch of different vegetables like sweet potatoes, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, like whatever vegetables I'm feeling that week. And I'll just roast a ton of it at the beginning of the week and put that into a huge container in my fridge. So then when I go to make lunch, I can decide, do I want to put that on a bunch of like arugula and make kind of like a bowl out of it? I did that the other day with arugula, feta, sunflower seeds, like made a big bowl. But then another day I might want it plain, or the next day I might want it with rice or quinoa. So I can kind of like decide what I want to do with it, whatever, like whenever that day comes. And then I'll do the same thing with like breakfast, not really. Some breakfast recipes that I've been like kind of on a kick with. I'm the same way. I can eat the same thing for like 2 weeks straight until I get tired of it and then I won't want it anymore. But overnight oats I am like so obsessed with right now. And I think overnight oats are a really good way to get a bunch of protein and fiber in early on in the day. So what I'll do is in a mason jar, I'll just put a serving of oats. I'll do a huge scoop of Greek yogurt for protein. I'll do a scoop of protein powder, a scoop of peanut butter. I'll do chia seeds, flax seeds, and then a bunch of berries and like prep a couple of those and leave them in the fridge. And I'll either do those for breakfast or like a snack. So that's like one of the snacks that I'll eat throughout the day as well. But yeah, I feel like ingredient prepping definitely works for me at this phase of my life. I will say though that when I worked in person, because a lot of you like might be saying, okay, yeah, but we still don't have time. We're not home during the day. When I worked in person, I was a huge meal prep girl. And I honestly think that I was a lot more strategic about my meals and in turn saved more money on my groceries when I did work in person because every single Sunday I would spend like 2 hours meal prepping. My roommates literally hated me because I would always have 12 meal prep containers in our fridge. And what I would do is I would prep 3 recipes, 3 servings each. So at the beginning of the week, I would decide like what 3, not counting breakfast, like these were just like lunch and dinner recipes, but what 3 recipes did I want to make? And then I would prep 3 servings of each. That would give me 12 meals for the entire week. I would take them to lunch. I would have them for dinner, and then like have some for the weekends and stuff like that. And that was like honestly really good for me for the point in my life because I could kind of like swap them out. Like in the morning, I could decide what do I want to have for lunch today? What do I want to have for dinner today? You still get a little bit of variety because you have 3 different meals, but there's also like some consistency. So you're not buying a ton of things. I listed some of the recipes that I would do. I would make a lot of, like I said, like the sheet pan chicken sausage and vegetables. You could either swap the chicken sausage with like chicken or whatever else you want to add. So do a ton of sheet pan meals. I would do a lot of like turkey burgers, and as my side, I would do sweet potato fries in the air fryer. Just like literally cut up a sweet potato, put them in the air fryer. Turkey burgers are so easy. You basically just make like a gigantic meatball with ground turkey. Um, and then I would also do ground chicken meatballs a lot. I like I'm clearly not plant-based, but I also almost never cook chicken because I don't love like handling chicken breasts and like dealing with all of that. And chicken also gets so dry if you leave it in the fridge. So if I am going to cook chicken, I have to cook it that day. But I do a lot of like chicken sausage, ground turkey, ground chicken, and things like that because I don't love to cook chicken breasts.
Hmm. Okay. For me, so this, I wanted to give this like general framework. I was like thinking about this morning when I was like putting notes together for this. I'm like, what do I actually eat? Because I feel like I just kind of have it down to like a good routine where I don't really think that hard about it. But my general framework when I'm shopping is I usually buy 2 protein sources, which is meat for me because I eat meat, 1 to 2 veggies, 1 to 2 fruits, and then some sort of like carb or side. So like a sweet potato, rice, quinoa, etc. Although, like I said earlier, I'm not like low carb, like in the way of like I really pay attention to my carb intake. But again, things like rice hurt my stomach. A lot of like gluten-free pasta alternatives just have so many like different gums and added fillers that hurt my stomach personally. They don't, I mean, I'm not saying they're bad foods or whatever. I don't believe in good or bad foods, but they just hurt my stomach, so I just don't really eat them as much. When it comes to veggies, I get a combination of fresh and frozen. Some things I like fresh, some things I like frozen. Certain veggies that hurt my stomach if I eat them a lot, like if I eat a lot of broccoli, my stomach just has a hard time. So I'll usually buy that frozen because if I'm going to eat it with a meal, I'm usually going to have that and another veggie. So I'm not eating a ton of broccoli so I don't hurt my own stomach. And I feel like you just have to be realistic about how much you're going to eat. And then 1 to 2 fruits because, like fresh fruit, because they feel like they go bad too fast because I'm just one gal and I can't eat that much fruit. But when anything starts to go bad, I freeze everything. So if I buy fresh cauliflower, because I love cauliflower, I'm probably not going to eat an entire head of cauliflower in a week. So I will literally just freeze the rest of it and then you can just cook it from frozen. So I'm not wasting it. And then when it comes to like recipes, I find a lot of them on social media. Like if you see like one of those recipe videos where they're like comment this word for the recipe, like I will probably be in that comment section.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, I just like feel like I find so many good ones, or I'll just Google like gluten-free recipe or dairy-free recipe, and I make a lot of swaps. So if there's regular flour, I just swap out the gluten-free flour, or regular milk, I swap for oat milk, or like I just do a lot of swaps because trying to find recipes that are good that are both gluten and dairy free and are like marketed as that can be kind of challenging. So I just do a lot of swapping around. But a few of my go-to recipes are egg roll in a bowl. I love that. So good. Salads, and I'll just have a bunch of different like things on hand to make salads. Instant pot recipes. I have an instant pot. I'm still like experimenting with it, but I love my instant pot. Yogurt bowls, avocado toast with egg, or just like literally just a meat with a veggie. Um, One thing I will say about the chicken, so I got my chicken prep down to a science. And I learned this because some people will know this creator, Sophia Panella. She talked about prepping ingredients ahead of time for her and her boyfriend. And she was like, oh, like she's like, my meat never gets like dry in the fridge. Like I don't know. And I noticed that in her meal prep container, she had extra, there was like broth in there. And I was like, wait a freaking second. So what I do every single week to prep chicken for my salads is I bought some food safe gloves, like disposable gloves on Amazon because I also hate touching raw meat. It grosses me out. Like I literally can't, especially having long nails. No. So I just take a glove, I smack my chicken into the air fryer, or the air fryer, what am I saying? Instant pot. I season the heck out of it, and then I put in about a cup of water and I put it in on manual for like 10 minutes. And basically, it creates a chicken broth around it. And then I shred the chicken up and then I store it in the broth so that the chicken is like fully covered in the broth, basically. And then I can literally reheat that chicken for my salads, or if I want to put it on top of rice or make like a shredded chicken burger situation, like whatever, I can. And the chicken never dries out at all, which is such a hack because I feel like, yeah, chicken gets so gross in the fridge. I feel like if it gets dry, but
Yeah.
I also love making turkey burgers. Like that's like a favorite for me as well. And one thing I'll say on this too is if you are someone who gets sick of eating the same meal, one thing that my mom did for me that I was like genius when I first moved because she knew it was going to be a lot like settling in was she took some of my favorite home cooked meals that she would make and she put them into like freezer bags. Like you suck the air out and then you literally freeze the meal basically in, I mean, it's better for like stews or like things like that. I wouldn't like I don't know if you could freeze like a cooked like pork chop. That might not be the best, most enjoyable situation,
No,
but
I think
like,
you can I think you can freeze like more times than not. Like my mom does
yeah,
that all the time too.
yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know how you like go about defrosting all of like a whole pork chop, but you can do it with like burgers. You can do it with like anything. But my mom literally just took these meals and put them in freezer bags, and then I could just thaw them out and like heat them up. And it was like I was eating the stew that she would make at home. Like, and it was so smart. So sometimes if I'm like, okay, I bought this whole, like one time this was so embarrassing. Embarrassing. I mean, it wasn't embarrassing. It was just like stupid. When I moved into my first apartment, I'm making this, or when I first moved into my apartment, I was making this pork meatball recipe. And I was just being silly and didn't think to look at how many servings of meatballs the recipe made. I just bought everything it called for. And it called for 2 pounds of pork, which made 35 meatballs. And I would eat like 4 or 5s or like little meatballs, 4 or 5 in a serving. So I had so many meatballs. It was actually insane. So I like froze a bunch of them and then would just like reheat and thaw them, put them on some rice with some sauce, and like I would literally do that for over the next couple months. So if you are getting sick of eating the same thing, you can like take a day to meal prep a lot, but freeze like half of it and then have those meals to reheat like
Yeah.
weeks down the line.
Yeah, 100%. Back to the topic of the chicken. I do something similar if I am cooking chicken. I typically will take the entire package of chicken breasts and put it all in the crock pot and just like essentially boil it in the crock pot all day and then shred all of it. And then I will leave some of the broth like in the container to not let it dry out. But honestly, I rarely ever buy chicken anymore because I never cook it. But what I will do if I want chicken is I'll just go buy a rotisserie chicken and I will shred the entire thing. Rotisserie chicken is literally $5 and I'll shred the entire thing and I'll put it in my fridge and I'll have chicken for the next like couple of days if I want to use it in a recipe or things like that. And then I also do always keep canned chicken in my pantry. I know canned chicken kind of like grosses people out and I wouldn't just eat it like plain, but I do use it in a lot of recipes. So yeah, I just like kind of keep canned chicken. Like I have this like high protein buffalo chicken dip recipe or like higher protein buffalo chicken dip recipe that I always make and I'll eat it with like carrot sticks and stuff. So I keep that on hand to like if I want to cook that over the weekend or something like that. You were talking about the grocery shopping, kind of like your strategy and what you buy. I'm sort of the same way, balancing like frozen fruits and vegetables with fresh fruits and vegetables. I just like know myself at this point and know what is going to go bad if I buy it, and I will buy those frozen if I think that I'm not going to be able to use it. But frozen vegetables are like literally the best thing ever because if you're not in the mood to eat a certain vegetable one night, then you don't have to. It can sit in your freezer for a while. I always buy frozen rice. I feel like this is like I don't know, I've just seen a lot on TikTok about how rice can like mold and get a lot of bacteria, like old rice.
Oh.
Have you seen that on TikTok?
No, I've
It's
seen
like
people talking about how you can get sick from eating rice if you
yeah.
reheat it too many times, but
Yeah, or if you leave it out
yeah.
for too long, or if you leave it in the fridge for too long, like there's a lot that, and yeah, don't quote me on this, but it just kind of grosses me out now. So I always buy the little bags of frozen rice, and they're like less than $1.
Oh.
And then when I am in the mood to cook rice, I can eat it in like 60 seconds. So yeah, just like doing things like that to make things a lot easier on yourself. And because when I'm hungry, I want to eat something within 20 minutes. I don't want to wait 45 minutes for anything to cook. So just like finding ways to make things a little bit easier. But I feel like we could continue talking about this topic for so long. I have so much more on my list that like we didn't even get to cover. So if you have any more questions about this topic or like things that you want to hear us talk about on the topic of health or grocery shopping, cooking, we didn't even touch like dining out, and that was like something else on our list. So let us know in Spotify what else you want to hear from us on this topic. And if you liked this structure of episode, we kind of like bounced around a little bit to a lot of different topics, but I thought this was a fun episode. We are out of time, so leave your questions and feedback in Spotify. You can also find us on Instagram at Girls Talk Money Pod. But thanks for tuning into the podcast.